Hello, welcome to Introduction to Object-Oriented Programming using C#. We're going to start today with the very basics. In fact, we're not going to code. I love just jumping in and programming. That's fun. But the problem with jumping in and programming is that you end up making a lot of bad code and bad errors. So we're going to talk about computers and what is programming and maybe how to program in order to kind of make our stuff better and more thoughtful so that later on down the line we're not stuck in a dead end. Okay, so let's first jump into object-oriented programming to begin with, because I'm sure all of you have a thought of what object-oriented programming does. In fact, don't look at the slide yet, just think about what it means to you. And then what I did below is kind of break these words into simpler words. So object, something you can program. And in here, I'm talking about a button, a form, that sort of thing. Things that interact, but they don't have to. That's just one type of object. As you'll see, we'll have lots of different objects. And these objects can store variables, like in terms of a button. You can choose its size. You can choose its color. And on and on. And objects are created by classes, which are essentially subprograms, either contained within a program or as other separate files. So they're just think of them as these big things. And actually, I don't even know if I want to say big things, but things that you can program and that they can have like little life and entities of their own. Oriented is basically how we're going to conform. So instead of, we're going to focus on objects and how to program and how to program them correctly. And then, of course, programming you would think is the easiest of the words here. But if you've ever thought of a good definition of programming, it starts getting kind of hard. My favorite is the first one, which is using algorithms to get a desired response. Well, in order to understand that one, we definitely going to get a desired response. So if I put 5 numbers in and I want to add them all up, the desired response is that total, right? But what is the process? And that process gets to be algorithm. So what is an algorithm? A procedure for solving a problem using executable actions. Wow, that sounds like a lot. and order to play. So think of this as kind of like a protocol. You have a set of steps and they have to be in a specific order in order to work. And we're going to do those using objects. Now, before we start getting fully into objects, let's just think about what we're dealing with here, because we've got C# that we're going to use. So how do we go to object-oriented program from just C#? Well, C# is one of many high-level languages. C++, Fortran, Visual Basic, these are other forms. And basically what they are is languages, and I do say the word language in the most literal sense because they have their own way of talking. If I talked in C++, you'd understand, and you understood C++, we could have a conversation. There's rules, syntax, the whole 9 yards. So that is going to be typed in, and usually it's typed in through an editor, and editors are not actually that fancy. They are just text editors. All they're trying to do is write, in this case C# language, what you want to write. But how does that get to the computer level? Well, you usually go with a compiler, and compiler and builders are essentially the same thing, or at least let's think of them as the same thing in this situation. High-level language has to essentially get translated into something that the computer can understand, or the device. And what the computer tells everything what to do in terms of its own machine language. So machine languages is all ones and zeros. And basically what a compiler do will take that and shove that into all ones and zeros. And now the CPU, which is kind of the brains of your PC, is going to create instruction sets on how to go about doing that. There's other things involved, but for C#, that's roughly how it works. Now let's look at C# in particular. We're going to use objects. Okay, so we know how a regular program works. Now we're going to use objects to program. And since we've already, or you probably have already done one, and by that you probably watched the video where I created a form and that was it. That form was an object. And the reason why it's an object, it isn't because you created it as an object, it was a pre-made object, which comes from the .NET framework. So that form is part of a set of objects that were created by Microsoft that you can use that can make everything easier for you. And once we have those objects, now we can even put more programming on top of them and change their dimensions, their variables, etc.